The movie opens with a scene where a convict, having escaped from prison, is running through an abandoned factory. He breaks open a hidden stash and pulls out a suitcase containing a stolen $1 million. At the same time, 11-year-old Preston is complaining to his pet fish that his older brothers are using his room as a storage space, and even stole the jar with all his savings. Their father sees all this, but doesn't react at all. He sides with the older brothers, saying they're running a business, making money, and since he loves money, he's fine with them storing their junk in the youngest son's room. One of the brothers says an interesting line.
Who has the goal makes the rules.
And then the father brings a brand new Macintosh computer into the room. Preston immediately goes up to it and starts exploring his brand new device. Later, the father drives Preston to a classmate's birthday party at an amusement park and gives him a whole $2, telling him to treat himself and not hold back. Troublemaker Butch starts mocking our hero. The kids all buy loads of tokens. Preston can only afford 6.
6, please.
But to ride the roller coaster, you need 7 tokens, so Preston is left watching the others with envy and going on the kiddie rides instead. Making fun of their poor classmate becomes yet another game for the kids. At lunch, Dad cheerfully asks if everyone had a good time. Preston responds with a question. Why are we poor? The parents tell him that they're just controlling their expenses.
Poverty-stricken. There must be some other reason I'm so depressed.
The brothers head out to a baseball game with their pockets stuffed with cash. Dad even asks if they need more money for spending. What Preston really wants is money for his birthday. At that moment, Mom hands him a letter from Grandma. But instead of cash inside, there's a check. And Grandma forgot to write the amount. Dad grabs the check and decides to fill it out himself.
How much did you get last year, honey?
1,000.
Preston's father wrote $11 on the check after taxes. He advised Preston to deposit the money in the bank so it could earn interest. Preston calculated that if he deposited it, he'd have $1 million in 342,000 years. After that, the boy added, "Buy my own house" to his birthday wish list and went to bed. In the next scene, we see the escaped convict cleaned up and visiting the bank where his former partner, who testified against him in court, now works. The money he had hidden was stolen and could be easily tracked by serial numbers. The thief wanted to exchange it for fresh bills. He said that tomorrow, a man named Juice would come to the bank with a check for $1 million.
Name is Juice. Juice.
And bank manager Biderman had to hand over the cash in person. At that same bank, our young hero Preston shows up and is captivated by bank employee Shay Stanley, who handles clients under the age of 21. The boy brought his $11 to open a bank account.
Is he okay? Oh, yeah.
However, the minimum amount required was $200, so Preston had to leave, doing so without taking his eyes off Shay. Biderman, meanwhile, handed the convict a set of temporary checks. At that same moment, as Preston was leaving the bank, troublemaker Butch snatched the check Grandma had given him and took off on his bike. Preston chased after him. He fell, and his bicycle ended up under the wheels of the convict's car. The criminal tried to drive off like nothing had happened, but due to Butch's yelling, a crowd started to gather.
I'm not talking to you!
The convict panicked and tried to quickly buy Preston's silence, asking how much money he wanted. At that moment, a police car drove by. The crook handed the boy a signed check and took off. Preston's parents punished him for ruining the bike and put him under house arrest. He was tired of their constant nagging and wished he had his own home, where he could live by his own rules. It was only now that he noticed the check from the criminal wasn't filled out. Preston entered his own name and, at first, thought about writing $200, then $1,000, but finally stopped holding back and typed in $1 million. Happily, he went to sleep. The next morning, Preston went back to the bank to cash the check. The woman at the counter laughed at him, but still took him to see the bank manager, Biderman. The man looked at the signature and the amount, and immediately asked the teller to return to the lobby. Biderman asked,
Juice?
That was the name of the criminal's partner, who was supposed to come pick up the money. But Preston replied, I don't want any juice. He said he didn't work for the crook. The guy had just hit him with a car. Biderman laughed, burned the check, which confused Preston, but then opened the vault and counted out exactly $1 million. Just then, the real Juice arrived at the bank.
What do you want?
Also carrying a check for $1 million. He was sent straight to Biderman as well. Preston's backpack was now stuffed to the brim with cash. As he left the office, he ran into Juice, who briefly grabbed the bag. Preston took off running, and Biderman reassured Juice that everything had gone as planned. Juice, clearly confused, threatened the banker, Only then did Biderman realize the enormous mistake he had made. Preston felt rich. His dream had come true. The first thing he wanted to do was buy a house that looked like a castle, something he had always dreamed of. To talk to the realtor, the boy used a voice synthesizer.
I'd like to make a cash offer on your house.
It turned out he was bidding on the house against the very same convict. Suddenly, Preston's mom, accidentally overhearing the negotiations, shouted out a bid of $300,000 for the house, which made the convict furious. Preston realized he needed an alias so no one would suspect anything. Looking at his Apple computer, he came up with the name Macintosh. After buying the house, Preston was thrilled and shouted, "I'm rich!" The convict and Juice pressured Biderman, and during the argument, the banker remembered signing a check for a kid with a bike. That's when everything clicked. It turned out that the beautiful woman from the bank, Shay, was actually an undercover FBI agent. She reported suspicious characters currently in Biderman's office. Preston had fully embraced the wealthy lifestyle and decided to run away from home. He ordered a limo and hired a personal driver for a hefty fee. At first, the driver didn't believe that such a young boy could be his client.
The car, please. I'm waiting for a client here.
But I'm your client.
Oh, right, yeah.
But when Preston tossed him a stack of cash, everything changed. The driver, named Henry, opened the limo door for him. The boy went on a shopping spree. He bought everything he had ever dreamed of: a TV, a stereo system, a massage chair, and the coolest toys money could buy. Henry turned out to be a great partner in crime for mischief. Preston gave him an expensive watch as a thank you gift and treated himself to a giant tub of ice cream. On the way home, they ran into Shay. Preston decided to make a move on her while she was out jogging and offered her a ride in the car. He told her the car belonged to his boss, Mr. Macintosh.
My boss, Mr. Macintosh. Do you want to ride?
She politely declined, saying she was busy. Preston's childish desire to go all out led him to order dozens of boxes of cookies and cases of soda. Toy delivery trucks blocked his dad's car from getting through the street. His father decided to investigate and was stunned to see his own son on the roof of a luxurious house. Preston explained that he worked for a Mr. Macintosh, and even if Dad didn't know who this Macintosh was, the rich man knew everything about him. With one word from Preston, the street was cleared. The boy turned his backyard into an amusement park, and Henry played games with him for a handsome paycheck. It turned out that the cash handed out by Biderman was indeed marked by the FBI, and someone named Macintosh had been spending it. Shay, of course, noticed. The criminals kept searching for Preston and scoped out a massive water park, hoping to spot him among the crowd. They carefully watched the area, but didn't find any signs of the boy. Meanwhile, back at Preston's luxurious mansion, Butch, the same bully who always tormented him, tried to sneak in. But Preston now had his own security team, and he confidently gave the order: remove the intruder immediately. The guards, without asking any questions, grabbed Butch by the collar and tossed him out the gates. Preston didn't need to go to a water park anymore. He had one at home. Just then, Shay, the attractive bank employee Preston had a crush on, came to visit. She was intrigued by the massive house and said she finally wanted to meet the mysterious owner, Mr. Macintosh. She admired Preston's office and offered to open a bank account for him right then and there. While Preston went off to get the cash, she took several photos with a brand new iPhone. Preston flew down the water slide into the pool and handed her $200. "Maybe Mr. Macintosh would like to open a bank account too?" she asked.
I'm sorry, he's busy.
Preston replied, "But I'm always available for you, and I'll send a car to pick you up tonight." Preston then asked Henry to get him ready for a date. Henry shared everything he knew about women.
Women love a great body. They love, look at this bod. A good bod because they want to feel they're protected. You might have to fight some guy.
Preston was still technically under house arrest. His father had strictly forbidden him to leave the house, especially in the evenings. But the boy already had a plan. He told his parents that a powerful businessman named Mr. Macintosh had taken a strong interest in his school project and was expecting to meet with him today to discuss possible collaboration. According to Preston, the meeting couldn't be postponed. An opportunity like this might never come again. His dad, being a lover of money, agreed to let him go. With his parents' permission, Preston straightened his jacket and headed off to his date. At the restaurant, he felt a bit nervous but tried to act confident. He decided to treat the lady of his dreams properly, just like he'd seen in movies and commercials. With some effort but a lot of determination, he pulled out a heavy chair for Shay, showing old-school manners. She smiled and sat down, clearly appreciating the gesture. Shay, actually an undercover agent, began asking questions about Mr. McIntosh. Preston said his boss had asked him to give her a gift, but she declined. It was too expensive. She was curious about what exactly Mr. McIntosh did. Preston had even prepared cue cards with questions, like whether she was married and how tall her shortest boyfriend had been. He got carried away, leaned too far back in his chair, and fell, pulling the tablecloth down with him. Shay laughed. Later, they grabbed burgers together. After dinner, Preston invited Shay for a walk and led her to a small plaza with a fountain. Just as they arrived, dozens of thin, high streams of water shot up from the ground with a hiss. Right at that moment, the criminals spotted them and gave chase. Preston managed to escape in his limousine. Shay thanked him for the evening, and he invited her to the birthday party of Mr. McIntosh. Preston didn't want to let her go, but now he had to focus on planning the party. Meanwhile, Preston's parents started to wonder. They'd been hearing more and more about this mysterious Mr. McIntosh, yet they'd never seen him. Even their older sons were supposedly working for this rich guy. It all seemed very suspicious. Preston, however, decided to go all out for his party and hired a professional event planner, a woman named Yvonne. From the first minute, she realized she was dealing with a child who had no clue about money but access to a huge budget. Of course, she immediately saw an opportunity to cash in. She started raising prices, confident the boy wouldn't argue or even check the bills. She reached into Preston's backpack herself and pulled out a $1,000 deposit. Henry had to leave, and now Preston had no one to play with. He had no other friends. Feeling lonely, he took some money and headed to a city park. He sat on a bench and watched other kids, his age, running around, playing tag, laughing. They didn't know anything about millions, bank accounts, or fancy dinners. They were just having fun. Watching them, Preston felt a deep ache. He realized that even with all the money, he was still alone. Toys, mansions, limos, none of them could replace real friendship or the simple joy of childhood. Suddenly, the trio of criminals spotted him again and gave chase, driving straight through the park. One of them almost caught him, but the car couldn't go any further. Preston fell off his bike and dropped his backpack. Juice lunged for him, but missed. The chase continued. Some kid picked up the backpack, but Preston quickly took it back, leaving the stranger just one bundle of cash. For the criminals, it all ended in a crash.
It might be easier just to steal another $1 million.
But then they caught Butch. Yvonne had hired an entire team to decorate the house, and the party was becoming wildly expensive. Preston began to have second thoughts about the extravagance. It was starting to feel like too much. On their way home, the criminals grabbed Butch to get information about Preston. Butch had hoped to be bribed, but he was wrong. The criminal hung him off a rooftop, and Butch immediately spilled everything he knew. Even Shay showed up for the party. Preston greeted her at the entrance in a sharp tuxedo. She was hoping that tonight she would finally meet Mr. McIntosh. Preston's brothers hinted that Shay might just be after money. Every time she came around, she talked about McIntosh. It seemed like all she wanted was his fortune. Yvonne had announced the party in the newspaper, and loads of guests had arrived. Henry, watching the madness, quietly recalled an old saying, "A fool and his money are soon parted." The gift table was overflowing, but Preston was told to stay away. "Those are all for Mr. McIntosh." Preston kept looking around for Shay while she discussed her strategy with fellow agents. The tables were covered with random junk and, shockingly, there wasn't even any ice cream. Yvonne handed Preston the final bill, and he was stunned to learn that the party had cost him $100,000. Preston rushed to his office and checked his balance. He didn't have enough to pay. He had just $332 left. All his money was gone. Just then, his father entered the office and asked the boss if he could send Preston home early. "He's been working too hard lately. Money's become too important to him, and that's my fault," the father admitted. "I was too demanding. I took away his childhood. I want to go home," Preston said quietly.
Thanks.
But his father was already gone. Preston tried to find Henry, but he had left. After all, he'd only been a friend for the money. Shay entered the office again. She was once more asking about the elusive Mr. McIntosh. Hearing Shay mention the name again, so focused only on McIntosh, Preston realized she was just interested in the money and told her to leave. The criminals finally arrived at Preston's house, but it was empty. Butch led them to the castle instead. Back at the mansion, chaos was breaking out. Event planner Yvonne was trying to reach Mr. McIntosh for payment. With no response and sensing she wouldn't be paid, she loudly announced that everything was canceled. The party was over. Watching the disorder, Preston grabbed the microphone. He stepped in front of the stunned guests in the grand hall and, with a shaky voice, asked everyone to leave. The guests, surprised, didn't argue. Some grabbed their gifts. Others even took leftovers from the buffet. In a matter of minutes, the noisy crowd disappeared, leaving Preston completely alone in a giant, empty house full of useless luxury. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. The boy froze, hoping maybe Henry had returned. But it was the criminals. They burst into the house, demanding to know where McIntosh was. They were the first to learn the truth. McIntosh didn't exist. Hearing this, they were momentarily stunned, then became even more furious. And they learned something else. The entire $1 million they had been chasing had been spent by Preston in just 6 days. Taking advantage of their confusion, Preston escaped down a water slide. Juice was thrown in after him. Biderman raided the dessert table. Juice landed in a trap and was pelted with baseballs. Preston hid from the gang leader behind tables. The criminal flipped them over, trying to see in the dark, but ended up trapped in a metal sphere. Preston climbed into a toy vehicle and rolled the ball across the lawn, finally launching it into the pool. The boy panicked, afraid he had drowned the villain, but then got caught himself. Just in time, FBI agents burst in to save Preston. They asked, "So, who exactly is this McIntosh?"
Who's McIntosh?
"I'm McIntosh," shouted Quigley, the gang leader, and told them to get off his property. He was arrested on the spot for money laundering and fraud. His accomplices were also taken into custody. Afterward, Preston quietly approached Shay and asked her to show her badge. She did, without hesitation. That's when he realized their date had all been part of the investigation.
Why don't you give me a call in, say, about 10 years?
6.
Okay.
She thanked the boy. His father arrived to pick him up, and waiting outside was Henry. He hadn't abandoned Preston after all. He'd just left briefly to buy his young friend a giant tub of ice cream. The very same ice cream that had been missing from the extravagant but somehow empty birthday party. The tub was bigger than Preston's head, and the gesture meant more to him than any toy or purchase. Back home, Preston was greeted by his family with a cake. They asked him to make a wish. He looked at a photo of Shay and made his wish. And in his heart, a thought crossed his mind. Happiness isn't about money after all.